Our next question comes from Councilwoman Virginia Cross from the Muckleshoot Tribe of Washington State.
Good evening, Senator. My question has to deal with our fishing rights case in Washington State. Years ago, we won a court case that gave the percentage of Indian fish to the tribes 50%. And at that time, it was no problem for any of our fishermen to make like $10,000 a night fishing. Now, with the deterioration of the fishing runs around the areas of our tribe, our fishermen are lucky if they make about $10,000 a year. What would you do as president to restore the fish runs?
Well, first off, I understand that you can't live off $10,000 a year in your state, not live comfortably. That is a very hot question. I don't have to tell you about what's going on out there and the concerns that exist between the white fishermen and the native fishermen who claim certain rights. I don't think I have a magic answer to that. All I do know is that I would, to set up climate, I come to it with a predisposition, mental predisposition, that these Aboriginal rights must be honored in some way. I don't have a specific solution to be able to tell you this is the law I'd introduce. Not at all. It's something that I would bring the native community in and the other fishing community to try and reason it out and figure out what is going to be an equitable solution. Because you see, that has not taken place. There's not been the leadership for that thus far, and that's why it's such a vexatious issue. I don't know if you understand that I was one of the only members of Congress to push for the law of the sea, and what problems that cost me in the fishing communities, because I was not for the 200-mile taking by this country. It gutted our ability to bring some sanity to the oceans of the world. And we have a treaty now, but the United States is not even party to it. That issue would come into that treaty in some regard. And so I would be very mindful as we move into that area that we be mindful of Aboriginal claims and Aboriginal needs. And yet, you know as well as I knew, that is interlaced totally with the sovereignty issue. Now, I can stand up here and make a lot of statements. I've got to tell you one thing I can stand up and tell you. I know these problems up close and personal. I've lived them. I'm the person who brought about regional high schools in Alaska so that the natives of Alaska didn't have to send their children down to the South 48 and not see their parents, but for once a year. That's what I did. And when I fought it through, believe it or not, it was a tough battle, and we won. And so I will address these problems. This is nothing you can push under the rug. But I can't tell you that I have some magic wand that's going to solve your fishing problem. I'm going to have the effort and the leadership to bring the parties in and arrive at a solution, not only a solution for the Aboriginal rights of Americans, but the Aboriginal rights of people all over the world. We're not an isolated country. We live in a global society, and we have to begin to always think globally, because we will not solve our energy problems, which is global. We will not solve our environmental problems, which is also global. I don't know that this has satisfied you entirely. I don't think it has, and I don't think I can, sitting up here with the level of knowledge I have about this issue, and I don't think anybody else can, because it hasn't been solved thus far, and you know it and I know it.
Okay. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Maybe I could follow up. I know you said you can't solve it, but let me ask this. Are we in danger of being the generation to lose salmon to extinction?
To lose salmon jurisdiction?
Salmon, the fish.
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar with the salmon. It goes out in international waters,
right.
And if somebody were to fish it out there, you got nothing to fish when it comes back. And so you need some kind of a global regime to really foster that. Right now, we turn around and we foster this by our military might. We scare everybody to death. That is not a way to solve international global problems. What you do is you try to reason that out, and then you'll say to salmon, I argued this 30 years ago, and the major opponents to what I was trying to do then was the East Coast New England fishermen who don't have jobs today because the banks have been fished out. Is that what we all want with our fisheries that God has given us on this planet? No. And we're not approaching that problem very intelligently at all.
Thank you. Our next question is from Chairman Jeff Hauser, the Fort Sill Apache from Oklahoma.
Met a bunch of them earlier. Glad to see you again.
Good evening.
Please.
There's a great need for decent housing in Indian country. A safe home is necessary for childhood development and to provide the stability and build the values that Indian country needs. There's overcrowding, there's a lack of electricity, a lack of plumbing in many of the homes in Indian country. What would you do to help ensure the American dream of home ownership to Indian families?
Well, to stop and think. Remember when Bobby Kennedy went to the various Indian areas? The problem was the same. That's, what, 20, 30 years ago? Has anything changed since then? So I think you ought to start looking at what will bring about change. And it's not politicians standing up here and making promises to you. What will bring about change is your own ability to get involved with the process. Now, I'll give you an example of it, a very crude example. And that is that the Indian nation spent about $7,600,000 last year in political campaigns. Well, you've had 3 people show up. If you want to give a lesson to the others, divide up, give us each $2 million or raise that, and then give the $600,000 to the governor for the Democratic Party because they were here too. And that's not a flip. I'm not trying to be funny here. I'm trying to be very serious. Money talks in a capitalist society, and if you want to talk, use your money. You've got some wealth. And so I would move from that about it's the economic underpinnings. The economic underpinnings of the reservations are abysmal. Abysmal. Now you're starting with your casinos. And the question about the casino gambling, I got to tell you, I just smile every time I go to bed thinking about it. Isn't it interesting that the Indians are finally getting back at the white people by getting into their pockets, by getting them to come and gamble their money away. My God, is there some justice in the world? Yes, there is. You just got to be patient. Well, all I'm saying is, it's not only you want to build housing, you want to do a whole bunch of these things. What I'll tell you should do is, you saw all these windmills out here? Well, I'll tell you, you got a lot of land. Indians got land. I'm going to Alaska. I'll be there on Monday, and I'm going to tell them, the Alaska Natives, start building windmills because that is the future. This country needs 5 million windmills as soon as possible because with 5 million windmills, we can move into a hydrogen economy and we can have no carbon. Well, I'm going to put on a carbon tax. Tell you straight out. It's going to be put on right at the beginning. Going to float through the system fairly. But if you don't want to pay any carbon tax, get off of carbon. And there'll be a vehicle to do this because what you do with the windmill right now, all they're doing out there is just taking electricity, putting it on a grid. Now, maybe your reservations are not in a convenient location. Well, let me tell you, you put on the windmills because you got wind. I know that. You got wind. What comes down is the power goes in to water, separates the hydrogen from the oxygen, and then you take that hydrogen and you can move it to a gas station and pump it in your car. You can tweak your car for about $2,500 so that you can use liquid hydrogen. This is not mañana. This could happen today if we had a commitment. The answer to your question is real simple. Get an economic base under the reservations so that people do not have poverty. And maybe somebody will ask me about the amphetamine problem in the Indian nation, and I'll deal with that facet of the economics of the reservation. Thank you.
Thank you.